How is it going, Guardians? It is your boy Turkey, again here at SGN Hub, but this video is going to be completely different actually than the usual that you see typically. It's theory crafting, builds, and what I believe is worth using in-game. But today we're going to be talking about something that I believe could be implemented via Bungie that is inspired by a very old MMO that is very near and dear to my heart called Phantasy Star Universe. This was an obscure MMO that came out on the Xbox, and to kind of just glaze over the topic, what we're going to primarily be talking about is player shops, and in my opinion, how it could create a new in-game economy and create reasons to play, allowing new people to hop in and have a reason to play, and also creating value for weapons that may or may not be available through the traditional loot pool, but could also be bartered for in-game materials crafting, and ultimately an overhaul of the game that I feel like Destiny just needs. So first and foremost, whenever we talk about player shops, we're talking about really a completely new in-game economy. And that's going to obviously involve player-to-player commerce. So whenever we're talking about this, I'm specifically mentioning, I guess, introducing a feature where players can actually create shops to sell the resources, weapons, and armor for in-game currency, i.e. Glimmer, similar to how Phantasy Star Universe did. Now, for those who aren't familiar, back in the day, this was an MMO, like I'd mentioned, and long story short, you could go to the second floor of one of the public spaces, and you could purchase what is known as a Guardian's shop license, which allowed you to open up a shop in your player space, your playered house, similar to how the housing, I guess, was going to be available in Destiny Rising, but you could sell your weapons, your goods, resources, materials, and all of those things in-game. And that's something that I feel like would actually be phenomenal for Destiny. This would ultimately allow things like Ascendant Shards, Enhancement Prisms, or planetary materials, or anything along those lines, like helium fragments, spin metal, to actually be used as currency for trade itself, or you could have those items up for sale, and the value of these things would be ultimately determined by the community. Not only would this provide a reason to go farm these things, or give you an actual opportunity to put them in a game in a more substantial matter, like using spin metal for a specific weapon crafting material like not material, but a brand like Hake, Amalon, Tex Mechanica. So if you had typically spin metal used to craft, this is a hypothetical, if spin metal typically was used to craft Tex Mechanica weapons, you would know that you'd have to go get spin metal from, like the Cosmodrome or wherever that other source was. But right now, you don't really have, in my opinion, an actual incentive to go do these things. And this would incentivize these things not only for Glimmer or the value that players determine rather than what you just dismantle and are given. You would have a completely different facet of economy to consider beyond just that. Also, you would have the customization appeal. So you would have the ability to potentially sell rare shaders or other ornaments for gear that are found from strikes, and actually add reason to run these strikes and do nightfalls. I feel like a lot of the things that new lights and returning players struggle with is finding a reason to run activities. And when I played Phantasy Star Universe, the game didn't have nearly as diverse and beautiful of an environment, but what it did have was reasons tethered to activities. So if I was enjoying a particular boss or a particular mission, I was running it over and over again. Yes, I'm doing that same mission. Maybe the loot rotates, but let's say that there's a cosmetic reward for defeating a certain boss. Let's take an example of a strike enemy in Destiny, for instance, Omnigul. Say that Omnigul, if you killed her, you got some type of cosmetic reward or a trophy that you could put in your player space, and players came in your room and they saw that this item was in your room. It could be a rare, it's just really for show, and it's just flair. It's something that adds another level to the game, and I feel like that does something for the game itself to have something like that. And upon speaking about new reasons to play, whenever you're grinding for tradable goods, that is another layer of the game. Players would be able to farm specific resources or weapons, and then you could stock your shop with whatever items, or you could sell things in whatever type of shop that you wanted to, and this shop would be ongoing, just like it was in PSU. If you weren't online, you could quite literally toss some stuff up, and hopefully somebody would come into your room and they'd search the shop database and come purchase some stuff when you weren't online. You would be able to hunt unique roles, but it wouldn't be so painful if you were just getting obliterated by RNG if throughout your search process for the specific weapon, you were able to come up with a respectable amount of money to actually go and purchase these items from player shops who were fortunate enough to get them. Now, obviously, some of these items could be crazy priced by players, but that's what makes the items rare, and that's what makes them worth attaining. And I feel like in the day and age that we're in, exotics especially do not feel exotic. And I know that sounds like a gripe from most players, but a lot of the 5 out of 5 rolls and the legendary rolls are the things that I pursue now. I feel like over time, the idea of a weapon being exotic has really lost its luster, and legendary weapons have become more special simply due to the handout everybody wins nature aspect of the season pass and even just Destiny itself. And I feel like that can even be exhibited in Cade's Retribution. I genuinely can't even wrap my head around why every player has such simple access to something that's supposed to be so special. And then they wonder why people don't want to retroactively go back and continuously use these things, and it's because it was so easy to obtain, and there's no actual subjective or objective value placed on items. It's just really based on the quest and how long it took you to do that quest, not really what you went through to acquire that specific item. And I feel like player shops could also add another layer to that aspect of Destiny's gameplay. Now also, it would encourage exploration, because right now, as I mentioned, you have no real reason to hop on the moon or to go to the Altar of Sorrows or go really anywhere that isn't, tethered to a powerful gear drop, a pinnacle gear drop, or something weekly or seasonal. The thing that Phantasy Star Universe absolutely had going for it is, even if there wasn't a Christmas event, Easter, whatever, Sonic the Hedgehog event, Knuckles, Tails event, you knew what you were doing. You knew where items were, you knew where resources were, what planet they were associated with, and there were in-game ways to figure that out. And Destiny is seems like a free-for-all, and that is a very large contributing factor, I feel like, to the lack of return that you get from players. They don't really feel the need to continuously, hop back on and keep playing, because there's no immediate directive, and there's no large overarching system that sets it apart, other than the fact that it is an FPS looter shooter. If you were to introduce something like a shop system to it, I feel like that completely adds a whole new layer. Going to Banshee 44 and Rahul can only do so much for you whenever they're the only ones with the available roles. Whenever you know there's this many roles in the game, and that's the only particular source for them, it's kind of insane to me. And the grind is almost unnecessary, because all of these things actually could coexist with a player shop system, and they would only help provide actual baseline values for all the things that would come with that system, in my opinion. Also, another large thing that I feel like a lot of players would be interested in, and that's going to be obtaining sunset weapons from other players, like vaulted items that are no longer in the loot pool. Sunset weapons that are no longer available in the game could be potentially traded between players, and it would reintroduce these weapons into the economy, and they would add value solely based on the actual in-game demand and not speculation of some YouTuber saying it is now valued. It would actually be visible based on who's buying it. If a weapon is 100k meseta in Phantasy Star and it stays at 100k meseta, it's obvious that nobody is really buying that weapon, or that really is just the strict value of it. And I feel like this is another thing that would combat the unnecessary conjecture between content creators online also. And the only thing that could be a little bit of a slippery slope is where you'd have to have some type of trade mechanics to obviously avoid any type of exploitation. There were some instances in Phantasy Star where players would do some types of bugs and trick players into dropping loot. But, be mindful with who you're trading stuff with in any game at the end of the day. I feel like bartering and trading, when it comes to peer-to-peer and shop, they would have to come hand in hand, just have the simple player-to-player trading, but then obviously the wider overarching player shops. Ultimately, I feel like the item valuation created by having a player shop would increase the actual foot traffic that you have of people playing the game, or just doing simple activities. You wouldn't have to have every single looking for group section in Destiny be know what to do for this raid or kick, or know what to do for this or kick. You'd have people comfortably farming helium filaments, or comfortably farming whatever world currency, or not currency, I'm sorry, whatever the world resource was, and then selling it in their player shop and potentially making money that way, and finding a way to outgear people who are constantly sweating and doing things in a different manner. And I feel like the only person that would have an issue with that different path is somebody that just doesn't really want to see the full growth of the game. Being somebody that put thousands of hours into that, I always found myself running missions or looking at particular roles or crafted items in player shops. And that's what I feel like made that game special, and it could absolutely make Destiny special once again. The supply and demand of items in Destiny is currently non-existent, in my opinion, and the only supply and demand that honestly seems to be popular is happiness or discontent with Bungie as developers. But if you had this economy, players would have something else to focus on than the constant fumbles that seem to be happening behind closed doors at the studios. This is, like I said, really just part one of a multifaceted video, and this one's going to be more about player shops. And I obviously have the gameplay in the background included of some Phantasy Star universe stuff to kind of draw parallels and show you guys what I'm talking about and why it would work in Destiny. But this has really just been something to ponder about. If you feel the same about a potential player shop system in game, please feel free to let me know. And in the next video, I'll be going into part 2 essentially, and we'll be talking about the crafting system and ultimately the crafting system and how it compares to Phantasy Star. There are so many parallels that I can't really just comfortably talk about in one video because this game was so far ahead of its time, and it had so many different fundamentals that would set it apart from games that are currently being released today. So be sure to look out for part 2. Without further ado, it's been your boy Turk. Peace.